Hi, my name is Ron Finch. This is the first time I've tried to make a YouTube, and I'll tell you, I'm having lots of trouble, but I'm also having lots of laughs. I don't know whether my voice is synchronized or not. I guess it doesn't matter. I did a couple of dry runs. I used a pointer, and I pointed everywhere except where I wanted to. Anyway, I'm a writer, and I'm an old writer. What I mean by that is I am old, um, over well over 75, just about 80. And I write stories from the past. The stories are set in 1928 up to 1940. If you look at the board behind me, you'll see 7 colored pictures at the top. Those are the 7 books that I have published. All in all, there are 33 mysteries that I've finished to date. Uh, Many of them yet to be published. And you'll see that just on the corner of the board, I have a big picture of lightning at 200 Durham Street. That's the first book in the series. That's where the mystery starts. And that's set in 1928. 1928 was an interesting year. Prohibition had ended. The Great Depression was just around the corner. The Jazz Singer, the first talking movie, very different than the talking movies we're used to, by the way, had just been released. Had Al Jolson in it. And there was trouble in the small Ontario town of Chaseford. Now I call it Chaseford. The Chaseford is AKA Stratford. I guess I wanted to be a little bit on the safe side and not accidentally say something I shouldn't, so that's why I used the name Chaseford. So I am going to talk a little bit about the book each time I come on. I've got 33 more books to talk about, so I figured this I can probably go to roughly 2050 if I last that long. Anyway, the first book I want to talk about is the first book I wrote, which was that one called Lightning at 200 Durham Street. Now there's a ghost in that book. Kind of scary, eh? I don't believe in ghosts. I've only met one, and that was Mrs. Gray, and she was reasonably friendly. My wife and I saw her on several occasions when we moved into an older house when we were young and had a small family. We especially noticed Mrs. Gray in the middle of the night. When we were up, she would be around. We didn't really see her in complete bodily form. What we saw was more of a shape, but she was very benign. And you're saying, this guy just said he didn't believe in ghosts, now he's telling you about one. Well, yeah, she was sort of a ghost. But we moved from that house, and many years later, one of my daughters came home from high school and said, "Hey, Dad, so and so asked me if we used to live in the house where the ghost is." So I guess other people were saying Mrs. Gray too. Anyway, in this story, it's set in the small town of Chaseford, aka Stratford, in 1928. And the idea for this story came to me when I was sitting on my front porch at the corner of Shrewsbury and Cambria in, I guess, 2017. And when I looked out across, it was early afternoon, but when I looked out across the porch and into the sky, I could see a storm was coming. And I think that's where the idea for the story started. So a few days later, about August the 6th of that year, about a month after my 75th birthday, I started this story. I'll read you part of it. I could feel it, just a sense. Was it real? There was something very vague, nothing specific, but I knew I was very uncomfortable. Maybe the feeling would go away. I hope so. A whisper of dread in the sky. I looked up from the book I was reading. From where I was sitting, I could see just above the railing on our front porch across the quiet street the large looming 3-story red brick Italianate house, and not much more. Evening was coming. To the east, the sky was darkening, but I saw no threatening clouds, but I could feel something. And I could feel those things that day when I was sitting there. Why was I so uneasy? I could just sense the edge of it. Maybe it's just something in the air. It was the time of year when things were stirring underground and occasionally peeking through to watch you with a wary eye. Why should I feel like that? It's getting cool. That's my excuse for going in. Excuse to whom? To what? Why am I making it? A sense that makes no sense is nonsense, but it doesn't seem like nonsense to me. I crossed the porch to the heavy front door. The latch stuck, but that door finally opened to an ever-darkening interior. I'm in. I'm safe. From what? Just a vague sense of uneasiness? I looked up the curving staircase. Nothing, just stairs. I put the light on. I needed to put all the lights on. Not to welcome anything, but to unwelcome things I didn't want to think about. I slowly turned and looked to my left, into the sitting room. I'd have to put the lights on in there as well. My good fortune, there was a lamp just inside the door. Now that I had it twisted on, I could see the fireplace and my mother's dolls. They looked peaceful, but I could still feel something, just a sense with a very unpleasant edge. It's only 5 minutes to 8, but already it was very dark. The rest of the family should be home soon. They'd gone to a family picnic at the church, but I didn't go. I'm 17, and I had to mind the store. Right after school, I had to get down to my parents' corner grocery store and look after business until 7. After all, it is Friday night, and the store stays open an extra hour on Friday. The rest of the week, the store is only open till 6, unless there's an emergency. If somebody comes to the door or are home later in the evening, then either Mom or Dad or I go to the store. I didn't like being home alone this particular night. I'm not usually nervous. There's something wrong. I can feel it. I have a foreboding sense of doom. My room is in the attic. I like it there. Being the oldest, my mother said I deserved a space of my own. Mind you, there's a lot of stuff stored up there, but there's room for my cot and the things that are important to me. And there is some light from a dormer window that faces southwest. Right now at 5'11", I can stand easily in the middle of my attic room. If I grow to be as tall as some of my uncles, it will become cramped quarters indeed. I'll go up there. I'll be safer in the attic. I was a little worried about the second floor because it's very dark up there. Once the lights go on, I'll be okay. The stairs talked to me all the way up. My dad had mentioned something about a mysterious two-way switch that involved some kind of ingenious wiring routine that allowed the hall lights to be turned on and off from downstairs or upstairs. I liked that idea and wished we had a switch like that. Fortunately, there's a light at the top of the stairs. I turned it on. It was still very dark in the house, but not as dark as the clouds I saw looming in from the southwest. I heard some rumbling and the growing anger of the wind. It's going to be a very bad storm. It's looming closer. I can feel the clouds humming with energy. It's probably just my imagination. I hope so. I made my way along the dimly lit upper hall past my sister's bedroom, then past my brother's bedroom, and through the second floor sitting room to the attic staircase. It's not a very fancy staircase, but the 18 wooden steps took me up to my space in the attic. I was terrified. It was so dark, and I had to get across the attic through the assorted stored family stuff to the small light near my cot. The storm was getting louder. Between the booms there was a crackling and an almost subliminal hiss. The lightning was closer, the wind grew higher, and those vague shapes in the attic seemed more threatening than they had been at any other stormy night. I looked out the window, now very frightened. I was in the house by myself, and in the path of what appeared to be a very wicked and peculiar storm. Within seconds, it sounded like I was being cannonaded. The thunder was so loud and so continuous that I lay on the floor beside my cot and covered my ears with my hands. I didn't know what to do. I'd never heard a storm so loud. My ears were ringing. The only thing louder than the thunder was the raging beating of my heart. I was in animal mode, just wanting to hide and wait. The lightning was furious. The air seemed energized. There was an odor, which occurs when the air is ionized. I'd read that in a book I'd borrowed from the library when I was doing an essay on electricity for my science class. If the storm would just abate a tiny bit, I could gather my courage, get to my feet, go down to the second floor and down to the first floor and then down to the cellar. It might be safer there, but there was no abatement. If anything, the storm became more intense. That doesn't seem possible. I began to wonder whether the house would remain intact. I could see things blowing past the attic window. It wasn't a tornado, but just an extremely strong wind. I needed a tiny pause in the storm, a chance to escape from the attic. At that moment, all the energy focused on staying rational. Suddenly, there was a brilliant light, leaving me momentarily blinded. The air seemed alive with electricity and strangeness. The roar was beyond deafening. There were other crashes and total darkness. Before I lost consciousness, I heard a strange man's voice shouting, "Joel!" That's the end of the first chapter. That's all I'm going to talk about with regard to the book today. I think you can tell that if I have to read every single word in every single book, then my estimate of 2050 is low. And I know you won't want to listen that much, so we'll try and intersperse a few things in there and shorten things down a bit. I had just a couple of other things I wanted to mention. If you want to contact me, I guess I'm holding this in the right spot. I hope you can see it. For any of those things, at the bottom, use my email address of ronsbooks@hotmail.com. So if you have questions, or you're looking for a speaker, or you want some help with your book, let me know. All right? I've got a little more in the way of a commercial, I guess. You know, I would like to sell more books. I won't keep that a secret. On this list, if you can see it, is what I call a synopsis of the first 7 books. I've tried to condense the main story in the book into just a few words. You're probably out there thinking, well, why didn't you do that with what you just said? It would have been over in 2 minutes. Well, I didn't. So I thank you very much for your attention if you did listen. And that's the end of today's story. Once again, thank you.